All right, good morning, everybody. It is Friday, and we are here. Oh, the weekend is upon us. It is still the full heat of October, not a single drop of rain anywhere in the northern parts of the country, and I think it's still okay. I don't mind it. I'd still rather have this than the cold, so I'm as happy as can be. Not that we're going to be talking about weather today, I can promise you that. We've got Ben joining us a little bit later on. We've also got the fantastic and brilliant and extremely talented comedian Rob van Vuuren, who will be with us later on. And then also George Mienie. Got a lot to get to today. All right. I've got to warn you in advance. I'm going to be away from tomorrow. So in other words, I won't be here for Monday's show or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So the whole of next week I am away. I've decided I made a last minute decision to head off for a little break. I've been bitching and complaining. You know how that goes. A couple of weeks ago, I even remember I said I don't want to do the show anymore. And I thought, yeah, you just need a break. We all do, right? And I decided, what the hell? I'm going to go somewhere I've never gone before. I'm going to see some things I've never seen before. I'm going to pay attention to a place that's just full of history. And I've kind of read a lot about this place, and I've always been interested in it. And it's a real juncture of civilizations. It's a place where East meets West, and where ancient meets modern, and where different cultures and religions and histories have clashed and sometimes amalgamated. I'm going to go to Istanbul, which some people still call Constantinople, and some people call Byzantium. This ancient city, which is now at the isthmus between East and West, this incredible place which has so much history, just so jam-packed of and so brimful of stuff that goes all the way back to ancient Rome, and the foundation of it, Constantine the Great, after whom it was first named. And then the incredible Ottoman Empire that came in its in its latter years, and then Muhammad Ataturk, who really was the first incredible secular leader in the Near East, and someone who seems to have really understood what a modern state should look like in a part of the world where not a lot of people agreed with him, and post World War I, establishing effectively the modern state of Turkey, which continues to this day to be a real power player in the area. But just such fascinating stuff in between, a truly remarkable and incredible place. It was the heir to Rome in some ways, because once the Western Roman Empire had collapsed, Constantinople became the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, but they still called themselves Romans up to the 1500s. And I just thought, you know what, that's all good. That's enough for me to make me want to go there and see it. And there's so much to see, and there's so much to take in. And I'll take a little break from waking up at, sparrow fart every morning and doing the show. Not that I'm hating it. I think I've, got over myself. And I'm just going to be looking forward to taking a little break and going somewhere different, somewhere I haven't been before. So it's literally going to be 4 nights in Istanbul, which is just apparently an incredible place just from a tourist point of view. Forget about the history, which obviously would be my default position, but there's this incredible geographical location right on the Black Sea and the Sea of Marmara, and this tremendous kind of, by the way, it's about, I worked it out, I did a little calculation, it's some 200 to 300 kilometers from the Crimea, which is of course the center of the world's greatest conflict at the moment, and not far from Luhansk and Donetsk, which are the areas in dispute between the Ukraine and the and Russia. So not far from the conflict, but an interesting place. And I've never been to that part of the world. And most people want to go to Cappadocia and go up in the balloons and stuff, but I'm not interested in that. It's not Instagram that fuels my desire to go to a place or not go to a place. So I'm looking forward to it. And let's see, we've got a couple of comments here. That's awesome. Gosh, I went there about 30 years ago, says Rusty. Yeah, everybody tells me it's just amazing. Sun Marie says, good for you. It's all about the balance. Yeah, you were bitching like a child, says Ricky. I'm allowed to. You're all allowed to as well. I mean, in the comments here, I see some names of people who are listening every morning. And, I love that and I appreciate it enormously. But we all have bad days, right? I mean, I love it when, for example, two people in the comment section start bitching at each other. That's really funny. And that happens often enough. Ha ha ha, Gareth, don't say you're going to Turkey. The woke culture is going to say you're going for a BBL. What does that mean? What is that? Going to Turkey, BBL. I'm not sure I understand. Sanane, maybe you can just help me understand that. I really don't get it. Bailey says, yes, Sunday. It's too early. Buffering. I think that's to do with the Formula One. People talking about that. Someone says here, Steph, drink lots of apple tea. Yeah, apparently they offer you that everywhere you go. So there'll probably be a lot of apple tea. I asked the question, maybe you can answer it. Is apple tea, does that give you diarrhea? Because that's a real thing to think about. Apple tea diarrhea. I don't want to get that. Gareth. Wait, hang on. Here's a second. Have a great time. Okay, thank you very much. Turkey is also the male hair transplant capital of the world. Look out for the bloodheads walking around there and on the plane. Well, I assure you I'm not going for a male hair transplant. Oh, a Brazilian butt lift. Oh, that's what a BBL is. Okay, got you. Jeez, I'm out of it, hey. I really don't know anything anymore. I thought about this the other day. I do not know what song is, aside from obviously the bullshit songs. Here's something I need to ask you. Why does it seem that everybody on Instagram and TikTok uses the same music for their videos? Is it that the cool people, I think we've discussed this in a kind of blithe and not particularly deep way. Why are these songs just trendy for these short videos, and someone cool uses the song, and then everyone else who thinks they want to be cool or are not cool, they copy that person and they use the same song? Or is it that you can only use certain bits of music in these videos? I really need to know this, because it doesn't make sense to me. Everybody uses the same songs in their videos. And there's some of these songs, if I hear them anymore, I'm going to lose my shit because it's just enough. Gareth, you're going to empty your bowels after a few cups of that apple tea. Oh, well, that's great. Thank you. Thanks so much. It's great. I'm looking forward to that. Even apple juice can make you spate poop if you have too much of it. You see, people know. This is why I ask shit. Well, hang on. Francis says, Turkey was one of my favorite holidays. You're going to love it. Yeah, I think so. I'm very excited. And everybody tells me it's just the most amazing place to go. Also, apparently, such lovely people, really, really charming, can't do enough for you. Fascinating language, which I know nothing about. Apparently, the local currency is a lira. It's about the same as the rand, which is cool because then it's not going to be punishingly expensive by conversion. But let's see how it goes. Michael says, if no one has suggested Göbekli Tepe is a must, I'm probably not going outside of Istanbul because there's no time. There are a couple of places I listed in my I've got to go if I'm in Turkey list, but it's a short trip. Literally a day on either side is travel, and that leaves 4 days in between. So I think to just try and soak up as much of Istanbul is probably the best strategy, and then you don't have to rush. But I thought Göbekli Tepe might be fun. It's this ancient site where they have these megalithic structures, which are pretty much inexplicable by historians and modern engineers. It's very difficult for people to figure out how people moved these stones and who built these things and how it was possible for them to build them at the time they're supposed to have been built. So that could be a good place, but I'm afraid there's no time for that. I wanted to go to Troy, the ancient site of the city of Troy, which was Hermann Schliemann, I think, is the guy who discovered it. And they've discovered different layers of Troy built one on top of the other. And it's up in the Dardanelles, which obviously has its own historical significance during World War One, the Battle of Gallipoli and all of that stuff. So that would have been fun. But it's a bit of a day trip, and I'm not entirely sure that it's going to be worth heading out of the city and then heading back in a hurry. And there's not much else to do. So you arrive there. Plus, I mean, I'm probably one of 500 people who'd want to see that in today's show. So I don't know whether it's Bodrum people always talk about, which is apparently magnificent. That's a little further down the coast. People also say Ephesus. One of my friends said that Ephesus is absolutely mind-blowing because the ancient city is so well preserved. You kind of come over this hill and you can see the actual amphitheater where Paul of Tarsus, St. Paul, started evangelizing about Christianity, which I think would be amazing to see. But we'll have to, you know what? We'll have to do that in another trip. Who knows? Okay, so Sanella's gone into even more of a description here. BBL is a Brazilian butt lift, so apparently Turkey is the place where these SA Instagram slay queens go to get that shit done, and then they come back looking different. Apparently, ass is cheaper there. Yeah, I need an ass because I've got the flattest ass you've ever seen. But I don't think I'm going to go and get that changed now in my 40s. I think, the people who are not into me because I have a flat ass now, they're not going to change their opinion of me later. We'll see what happens. Okay. Melissa says typo error. They're busy having a big argument here about all kinds of things to do with health. And then one of our guests who will be on the show when I come back, and a friend of mine, Addicts Cage, says, fun fact, he's just finished his last show at 947. He says, fun fact, Santa Claus is originally from Turkey. Yes, and I still believe in him. Yeah, I'm not surprised you do, Alex, but I didn't know that. So you see, you learn something new every day. All right. Yes, it's been in the thick of the Jewish holidays, as Ruth says too. And yesterday was Yom Kippur, which is the most important date on the Jewish religious calendar. So the Day of Atonement. I'm always unsure of which particular holiday greeting you meant to. Shana Tova is usually the kind of happy holidays, right? But then you meant to wish people well over the fast on a day like Yom Kippur, because people fast, and then in the evening of that day, then they obviously will, have the opposite of fasting, which is feasting. But it's always interesting to me to pay attention to these various holidays. It's like when Ramadan occurs, and when people go into various, Diwali is a special holiday for Hindus. There's fireworks involved there. I like to know how these things work, but I'm always a little unsure of which greetings to use, because sometimes you use the wrong greeting for the wrong holiday, serious holiday, and then you're like, oh, happy holidays. Yeah, it's not the new year. All right. Okay, I get that now. All right. We've got lots coming up today. I said Ben would be on a bit later on. That's going to be good. We've got plenty to talk to him about this morning. And if you've got anything to say, you can always let us know what you're up to. Just send us either a voice note, which you can drop in on our WhatsApp line. Let me give you that quickly so that you can get hold of us whenever you want to drop us a voice note. 783-6214. 783-6214. And if you want to email us, contact@cliffcentral.com. We've got a busy day ahead of us today. So something that's worth discussing. I was very confused last week by Robbie Collins, and you may have got the impression I was a little irritable. Not with Robbie. I have no problem with Robbie. He's a nice guy, and he's funny, and he's speaks for himself, and he doesn't need any defending. But I did, I take people at their word, and I listen quite carefully when they say something. I have to, because I've got an audience of people who are listening even more intently, and you guys are not going to tolerate. You're not going to tolerate bullshit. And if someone is inconsistent, then it it makes itself hopelessly apparent to you. I was struggling because on one hand, Robbie was busy telling us how much he doesn't care what people think and if they're offended, and all these people who tell him what to do during a show and then afterwards complain about him on social media or whatever, and how mean social media is, and we all understand that. We've discussed that ad infinitum. But then he was also saying he doesn't care. Now, either you care and people are mean and that bothers you, or you really don't care and you risk being called a psychopath, because that is what not caring at all what other people think can make you. At its extreme, a sociopath, someone who doesn't give a shit what anyone else thinks. They have their own way of doing things. They've got their own set of intentions, goals, their own agenda. They pursue that relentlessly and to the detriment of whoever else comes in their way. That's what a psychopath is. And no one can be that without being an enemy of society. And you find people like that are often not very popular in society because they tend to be really awful people. So a little bit of not caring is fine, but too much of it turns you into that. And I think we all walk that line in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's because of the things we like or the things we don't like in life. And then you get people who are completely dependent on what other people think, and that's also awful, because those people are so easily swayed by popular opinion. They will do just about anything to be liked. And I often find that they don't necessarily have any guiding principles at all. And somewhere in between is where 99% of us exist, right? And you've got to decide for yourself which way you want it to go. And I just got the feeling that Robbie hadn't necessarily, maybe also, he's not old, but he's not a spring chicken either. Maybe he's just never really examined these things to the extent that we have on the show. I'm not saying you necessarily have to, but at some point in your life, you got to try and figure out who you are. And I think that was very clear on Friday. It was also, someone pointed out, why is it that all the comedians we've had on, and I love comedians, they make me laugh. They're good fun to talk to. They perform for a living. So they come onto the show and they very often have a lot to say. I don't have to pull teeth with comedians. And I appreciate that, because some guests are hard work. Only in the exercise of delivering value to you as a listener. Anyway, these comedians, someone pointed out that every one of them has got some mental health issue. Now you could argue, well, everyone has some mental health issue, right? But it seems to be a very, and I spoke to Professor Zabo about this the other day. He's the host of our Beyond Madness podcast. I said to him, Prof, why is it that everyone says they have some kind of mental health issue, even if it's, obsessive compulsive disorder, which I've admitted I may have. I don't know if I do. I've never been diagnosed, but people tell me I have it. Or ADHD, the attention deficit thing, which I've also admitted I may have that too. I may have had it as a child. One of my friends told me this week he's been diagnosed with prefrontal or frontal epilepsy, which doesn't result in fits. And I mean, I have no reason to doubt that there's a true case for him. He's not the kind of person who would make this up. But who knew? He's got to 40-something years old. I've known him his whole life. And he said this is part of the reason he has a brain fog some of the time. I'm not sure why, but there are a lot of people who seem to think it's quite cool and trendy to have a mental health problem at the moment. And maybe it has become cool and trendy. A lot of people going around. And I think part of it too is this victim narrative that everybody's buying into, that there has to be something you can bitch and moan about. Your life has to be hard. You have to suffer. You have to make it clear to everybody that you don't just live a happy, perfect life. Because I suppose the media, television talk shows have made people think that everyone cares about your mental health. But I don't really think they do. And I hear these guys and girls who go, oh, I have depression, I have anxiety. I don't know that there are serious numbers of people who have those things. You could just tell from the number of prescriptions that it's outrageous how many people are on prescription medication for anxiety. And we'll talk about this with Ben later on. But here's a comedian, someone who's tasked with, and this goes for all comedians, by the way. I'm certainly not piling on to Robbie. He was, it was great to have him on the show. But all of them want to go into some kind of like mental health discussion at some point, which somebody who was listening to the show sent me a message afterwards and said, please find a comedian who doesn't have some kind of problem. I will try. So I'm just going to say what Lindy says here. She says, I watched the Robbie Collins interview. I couldn't finish. He was cringeworthy. His reflections on Spur, and he kept contradicting himself about social media. Yeah, you see, it's these half-baked opinions. And I'm not saying in Robbie's case that is exactly what it is, but it certainly sounded like it when, you talk about cultural appropriation with Spur, for example. It's not cultural appropriation if it's a cool thing. To me, if you call your sports team the Atlanta Braves, I don't think you're insulting North American, Native American culture. It's like you want, they're the Braves. There's a team that you support if you're in Atlanta. Why would you, how could you be accused of denigrating that culture if you choose to use their terminology, their iconography, in order to build a sports team that you love? Surely that's not appropriation. If we all grew up going to a restaurant where, there's an Indian chief as the symbol of it, and we all loved going there, how is that a bad thing? Surely that's doing credit. You could always just name things. It appears to me that what it's really about, if you burrow deep down into it, and this is something that perhaps we need to get into, is that cultural appropriation is always wrong unless it's white Western European culture, in which case they're always wrong for appropriating. And I mean, I don't want to get too sensitive about this because I don't care about it. White Western European culture and how that's perceived, because I don't think there is just one. But it's always cultural appropriation if it's stealing from anyone who isn't white Western European and probably heterosexual. Those are the bad people. So they're always stealing culture. But everyone who has adopted all the ideals of the Enlightenment, which clearly stemmed from Western European, kind of patriarchal, heterosexual 1700s culture, all of those things, that's not cultural appropriation. So I don't want to get too deep down this hole, but to go after Spur like he did was very weird. I agree with Lindy there completely. Gareth, we need to talk about Pumi. It's becoming a problem. She refuses to blame the electorate and keeps blaming the opposition parties. Well, Pumi and I had an argument about that on the show yesterday, and we will pick it up next time we talk, because I'm sick to death of hearing people make excuses for, and Bill Maher came up with this brilliant term. I used it yesterday, the soft bigotry of low expectations. So just to go over this, and we'll pick it up with Pumi next time she's on the show. We've got a lot to do today. So Pumi said the people of Giyani in Limpopo, who voted 75% for the ANC in 2016, and then after a month or months of not having any water, voted 74% for the ANC in the 2020 election. She said, oh no, it's not their fault. It's the opposition party's fault for not offering them a better alternative, which is an argument. It's not, I don't think it's a particularly credible argument, but it's an argument. My problem is we do not look at the people who are making those decisions, because clearly, if you voted 75% for the ANC, then they don't give you water for a month or months after or before the next election, and then you vote 74% for them. You have to take some responsibility. We have these parallel judgment zones that we operate in. And it makes me sick because it really is the soft bigotry of low expectations. That's the term that Bill Maher uses. Soft bigotry of low expectations means you judge everyone, you try and treat everyone equally. That's the basis of any equality discussion. Everybody is equal. Treat everybody equally, except if they are poor, or you can find some reason to build them into the left's victim narrative. Then you're not allowed to do that. Then you have to develop two separate sets of judgment circumstances, two sets of paradigms for judgment. The one, you have to drop your standard right down to a point where you can't actually judge those people because you, deep down, maybe you feel guilty or you feel sorry for them, but they are victims, essentially. So all judgment, all rules, all the normal ways of figuring out whether someone is accountable or responsible for themselves go out of the window because these people deserve your special protection. And that's what's happened in Guyana. So we don't say, oh, well, they're bloody stupid for voting that way. They deserve whatever comes their way. No. Now we must blame, of all things, the opposition party for not doing a good enough job. So yeah, Pumi and I will pick up that argument. Don't worry, Carl. We will get there. There's lots to get to still. Yonda says it's the Hollywood mentality that's done this. We see famous people who are doing well and living a famous life, and suddenly they're suffering from mental health. That is such a good point, Yonda. Maybe it's also guilt. People who've done well, people who are in extremely cushy conditions, people who live these incredibly privileged lives, they feel bad about the fact that they're doing so much better than the average person on earth. And then they develop this victim narrative to make them feel better and to be able to allow them to cope with having that much better a life than everyone else. That's a very good point. Okay. Here's Carl just going on about his mom, 71. She was diagnosed with epilepsy 2 years ago. It's been hell. The doctors over-medicated her to the point where they almost killed her. Jesus, I'm sorry. Anna Marie says, I'm thinking of Robin Williams. That was a shock. You never know what's going on in someone's life. Look, it's true. And I think also when we're talking about comedians, perhaps part of the argument has to be, these are people, very often comedians are actually depressed. Robin Williams shocked so many people because everyone thought he was so happy, but he wasn't happy. He always made very clear he wasn't happy. You would see the characters he played. In movies, his best characters in movies were always characters who were struggling with something. And he played them well because he understood that. And remember, the people who make you laugh, the tears of a clown argument, that's not something anybody's unaware of. The tears of a clown argument is very valid here. Sanele says, I also got a bit of that from him too, Gareth. I think you're talking about Robbie. Last Friday, right? I had been to his comedy show the previous night, a definite contrast. He seemed like he wants his brain bread buttered on both sides. Hey, it happens. There's pressure on people. Mongezi says, Robbie's not a terrible person, but that interview was a cringe fest. You're so right, Gareth. Also, heterosexuals are always and then always in the wrong. Well, yeah, let's not turn that into a victim narrative because that I can't stand. Gareth, the last person who confessed attempted suicide on the show ended up being successful and killed themselves. Robbie Collins is on watch. Yeah, that was double HP, shame. I think about him often. Sanolo says, I think that the thing is that when we're growing up, most of us would have been diagnosed with one or other disorder. And as a 70s baby, the flip side is nowadays, everyone has to have a disorder. Yeah, I think that's true. Michael says, God, please do not let us lose Pumi, then I will never be able to watch the show again. No, don't worry. She's not going anywhere. Daniel says, when it's said the ANC is corrupt today because due to the structure, I don't want to talk about that now, Daniel, if you don't mind. I really don't. But I mean, let's not go too deep down the political rabbit hole. It's Friday, and we try to do No Politics Friday. Here's Ben, everybody. Yay, Ben,
hey.
You got dressed for the show this morning.
Damn right, yeah. Well, I've got to start my days. early. The sun rises so much earlier,
I know. What's that shirt? Yeah. What does it say on your shirt? I think I've seen that one.
My Jackson Zuby shirt. Am I getting this wrong? Yeah. Jacksonate, to protect
Okay.
yourself mentally and physically against weakness, Gareth. That's what you do.
I like it. All right.
You got to get your booster shots every single week. I'm going for my booster later, which will be about an hour and a half session at the gym, and then
Good.
I carry on being a happy person.
Just be careful when people talk about a booster. They mean that they're going to go and get their booster vaccine shot, even though at this point anyone who's doing that needs their head red. Honestly.
Yeah, I mean that's just so sad. Huh? It's just so sad. I mean, if you letting the dust settle and you still have eyes and you still think that stuff's actually a thing, then you just love having troubles in your life.
Well, maybe that's it, because we were talking before you came on about all these people who have, depression and anxiety, and I do not want people to understand this incorrectly. Please, I'm going to explain it as clearly as I can. If you still get it wrong, maybe I'm a bad communicator, but I understand there are people who have real depression. There are people who have real anxiety. There are people who cannot function properly without, first of all, medication. Second of all, a lot of therapy, a lot of hard work, and it's life is difficult for those people. I get it, but we're not talking about them when I go into the next part of this conversation. I'm talking about this kind of casual, oh, well, I suffer from anxiety. I mean, I've got a couple of friends who in the last 5 years maybe have said to me, oh, I've got, terrible anxiety. And I don't understand what that means. So it means, what, you're anxious when you go outside. Now, these people are functional. They get on with their life. They have sometimes very important jobs. They're responsible people. They've got good lives. They're living productive and successful lives. But they've now got this thing, which they tell me is a very serious and debilitating thing, and they need to be on meds for it. And I think, what happened? Again, I always compare this stuff to history. It's all I have, because history is what I studied. So what did our ancestors do? What did your great-grandfather do, Ben? What did my great-grandfather do when they had to put on a tin hat and go and fight in the trenches in World War I? You telling me they didn't have a bit of anxiety over that? And I'm sure that some of them were very fucked up to start with. Some of them must have been made fucked up by war. Undoubtedly, that was, you want to talk about trauma. People talk about, oh, I saw a spider in the shower the other day and I've got terrible trauma. We use that word trauma willy-nilly now. People are like, I'm traumatized by reading something on Twitter. I'm triggered by someone else's opinion, And we hear people talk like this, and I think, Jesus, I'm pretty sure that someone who fought in a conflict that was as unbelievably destructive as World War I, remember, they talk in the area of some 20 million people who were just killed in the trenches, in Western Europe. That's a phenomenal number of people. And just blood and chlorine and mustard gas and guts and just hell. Like, okay, boys, we're going over the top of the trench. Get ready, put on your hats. This is pretty much like, these are non-suicidal people walking into suicide. You're telling me that's not trauma. That is ultimate trauma. And the ones who survived, maybe they were the unlucky ones, because at least the ones who died didn't have to deal with that trauma. Who knows how much long tail effect that had? But when I hear people talking about anxiety, trauma, and depression, I can't help thinking of like that and doing a comparison, a side by side. Because yes, there are difficulties to living in the modern world. We've discussed some of them on this show, social media and, the pressures of modern living and all that stuff. It's hard to be a parent, etc. But my God, I do a comparison. You can't say that, there's no way you could compare depression, anxiety, and trauma today to anything that's come before. Forget about the world wars. Any ancestor of yours must have had way more trauma than you, and they made it. They kept going. They made children. They tried to feed and clothe those children. They tried to educate them, tried to give them a better life. We're talking generations and generations of people.
So I mean, obviously, as you preface that there are people who have big problems. They have a lot of like medical anxiety, and there's people who just have chemical imbalances. We know this. But I would like to sort of counter your arguments and say that this might actually be a very difficult time where anxiety is more prevalent for very good reasons, and that a lot of humans, I think, don't have significance. Now, for my own sanity, I have a separate channel on Instagram where I talk about like training for a mindset kind of thing called Average Athlete. And
Yeah.
one of the things I did last week was a video around significance, in that when you get to a stage in your life, say my age, our age, you kind of lose a bit of significance because you're no longer popular. Your popularity circles shrink a lot. You physically shrink and all kinds of other things. Your balls sag too low. You're not as funny as you used to be. You're not as attracted to the opposite sex. Career wise, you're not the new young thing in the office. It's harder to do business because you got less patience, less drive, so you're less significant. And what that does is that it gives you like this, oh well, why should I bother mentality. Now if you look across a lot of people that have anxiety, is that they don't really feel like they've got much significance in things. They're not going to war, they're not standing for something. I mean, like, look at our country. What do we stand for? Patriotism used to give you purpose. Now it's just something that's guiding you towards acting like a dumbass. As much as
all right, so you're making such a good point. So let's just gather some thoughts here together, because otherwise we're going to get lost in the reeds. So pause where you are. Purpose was provided to those people in previous generations by a couple of things.
Yes.
Belonging to a nation, right, and feeling proud of belonging to a nation. Your king and country kind of argument, having a culture that was always massively important, not a global culture, but a culture of being a Zulu, being Afrikaans, being, French, being whatever.
Yeah.
Culture gave meaning to people. So you'd ask them, what are you? Who are you? They'd say, I'm a husband or a father. So first of all, family would be the thing they'd go to. Then they'd tell you what religion they were. Religion was massively important. It gave people tremendous amounts of significance, importance, power, and moral and ethical teaching, which they usually tried to apply to their own life, right? Perfectly or imperfectly, who cares? But religion was important. Now, I don't think people have the same feeling about nationhood. I don't think people have the same feeling about culture. I don't think people have the same feeling about religion. So all of those things have been pulled out from under them. At least those people who went to the trenches had that stuff.
Totally. And I think they also had the idea of love. There was like monogamy was a big thing, building a family, having that nuclear family to create your own. You'd build a house or you'd have a house. Now, I mean, I definitely don't want to sound like a doom and gloomist, but I always come, I love history like you do. And I always look at these things as my frame of reference as to why my life might not be where it is, or could I be doing better? And I look at like most people around the world, they're living in apartments. So it's this box to box living. They go into an office, another box. They're in their car in traffic, or they're in a train or public transport. They don't feel very significant, right? You're just another person doing the exact same thing as someone else. The only difference is your name is slightly different, and I don't know, maybe your Pornhub history is different to your neighbor. Like, it's all just very, very, very similar. And I've never been a religious person. It just doesn't appeal to me because I find holes in the story. I scrutinize things. That's me. I'm critical. But I read this thing recently. Like, if you don't have a higher power or something that you believe is better than you, then all you really are doing on this earth is eating, shitting, and occasionally fucking, and somehow you'll do that again tomorrow until you can't do that anymore. Like, if you don't have a standing where you're part of something that you feel like you have a role, then you just have no purpose. And I think a lot of people are just more and more having no purpose. They've got, as you say, I think in South Africa's case, that's a bigger thing because we don't have a country to be proud of. People always go on about the fact that, we're such resilient people, whatever. But Cyril's a giant waste of time, and everything else. And like Pumi's apologizing, as you were talking about earlier, that is an ingrained mindset that people have. So there's nothing to be proud of here. It's just, it sucks. But like, so where are people getting their significance? I think is the question of where I'm going with this.
Part of what we do on this show is we try to unpack these things and understand them from whatever your point of view is. And Asha says here, Gareth, stop. You're always saying that having loving parents is the biggest privilege. It is. Plus, you know zero about trauma. Please stop telling us what trauma is while sitting comfortably in your chair. Okay. So, Asha, this is another bullshit argument that's been brought up, that you have to have experienced things in order to be able to talk about them. Nonsense. This lived experience narrative nonsense is completely immaterial. You don't have to be in someone's shoes in order to try to understand or make sense of it. That's what everybody does on a daily basis. I walk down the street and I'll look at somebody and try to figure out in an instant And there's no way I can know everything about them. Whether they either A, a danger to me, whether they're interesting, whether they, the kind of person I want to observe for a little longer, whether they're pretty, ugly, rich, poor, tall, short, black, white, educated, uneducated, all of these things, your brain tries to do a quick fix on like that person because they may be important just for a second in your life. You don't have to walk in their shoes for 17 years. Maybe if they're really interesting, maybe you will. Maybe you'll pick up their biography and read everything you can into their lives. God knows we've all tried to do that with someone we admire, with someone we don't admire, someone that we're fascinated by. But you don't have to live in someone's shoes to try and understand it. I'm asking these questions, and I'm not particularly interested in whether or not we're going to agree about it by the end. But it's interesting to ask the question. It's interesting to talk about it. So, Asha, would you rather have me only talk about things that directly affect me? Am I to avoid anything that is not inside of exactly the lane of my life? I mean, because then we're going to have very boring discussions every morning. So what do you want? What do you want?
Also, Asha, I think it's really rude to assume that Gareth's not had trauma. I mean, he talks to Pumi every Thursday about stuff in this country.
Hey,
there's enough trauma in there for a year. Yeah. It's So what I say about significance, I think that there's always a positive spin on this kind of thing. I think anxiety is something that happens when you don't have perspective. So you think, oh shit, this is all I've got right now. The ceiling over my head of all this crap. This is now me. But you can pick up literally new hobbies and new things and do new things that can make you better. Like life is about perspective. Usher over there, who says that you don't have any trauma and doesn't understand maybe what your life path is, that no one actually truly really embraces perspective. So you think you're having a shit day. Like I go through this and I know that my life's not traumatic, but my life's obviously got its problems. But the moment I get perspective by talking to people like you, who, you're someone that's different to me, you're far more clinical, or just talking to someone at the office that I don't even know, but we end up being at the kettle station at the same time, and this person's having a good day. It's like, well, fuck, this person doesn't appear rich. This person doesn't appear to be like a business owner or anything, but look at them smile and happy. Perspective is something that gets you out of this anxious state a lot of the time, but people need to be open to it. Perspective is brilliant. That's why travel's so good. That's why history is so good. And that's why connecting with new people is so good.
Yeah. And you might not get it right, but try to see it from their point of view. Try. But because I haven't actually lived the experience of another person doesn't mean that I can't tell what's going on there. I can't make sense of it. That's all I can do, actually. So, it's like these people who go, well, you don't know, you're not a woman. So what? I'm not to ever think of the world or even attempt to make sense of the world from the point of view of the women in my world. That's ridiculous. That will turn me into a complete psychopath, because the desire to try to understand doesn't necessarily mean I have to get into your shoes. But because I'm interested in you, I might want to have a conversation with you about this. You're going to dismiss me out of hand because I'm male, for example. I mean, that's stupid. Then we're never going to get anywhere. And also,
exactly.
By the way, who do you think you are? You think your life's so interesting that you have the only unique perspective on things? I don't think so. That's why human beings cry at the same time in movies. That's why we feel the same way when we hear a piece of music. That's why largely you can predict the way a person will behave. Lived experience is no guide, and it doesn't make you special.
It's just what you're going through.
Whether it's traumatic in inverted commas or privileged, it gives you no unique perspective. Everybody has more or less the same general human experience. Sorry. If that makes you boring and, again, just something in a box, then that's what we are.
But everything gets popularized nowadays, and I think anxiety is something like it's almost like a great word. I mean, if anxiety was like piles, if they called it brain piles, it wouldn't be as cool, so they wouldn't be used a lot. Oh, I'm suffering from brain piles. But anxiety sounds like a cool word. It's like, oh, that sounds quite complex and interesting. Tell me about it. Right. But brain piles would be dismissed straight away. Like, oh, with your fucking brain piles again. Get over it. But just getting back to the whole thing about having significance is that there are just times where life is so much more difficult, and then people must also understand the difference between stress and distress. Like, you're going to have stress every single day of your life, which is good a lot of the time because it means you're trying something and nothing in life is easy, nor should it be. Distress is when you start looking at things going, fuck, I have no idea how I'm getting out of this. I have no idea how I'm going to equip myself to deal with this. And a lot of that also comes down to ability. So if you're getting stressed about the same thing or you're getting anxious about the same thing over and over and over, just try to become better at it. I'm not saying it's a silver bullet, but like if you're anxious about exams, well, have you studied as hard as you could have? Are you anxious about your health? Okay, well, are you as healthy as you could be? People don't ask these questions, that they get completely enveloped in that base stressor. It's like, oh, I'm anxious. Damn it, give up.
All right, well,
yes,
I
think there's always something.
One more point from her, and then we'll stop this because I don't want us to go down a very boring tangent here. But she says, you make points, Gareth, and you drive opinion far more than you ask questions about topics you have not experienced. Well, I have a half an hour on a Friday where there's no one for me to ask questions of, and I can't keep just reading comments from the listeners. That'll be like 7:02. So I have to drive opinion.
They have listeners?
Jesus Christ, Asha, I have to make points. Otherwise, what the hell are we going to do for that half hour? Do you want me to? I mean, I don't think you know how the show works, even though you're a listener. Okay, all right, let's leave it there.
So Turkey, hey,
I even asked this morning, will I get the squirts from too much apple tea? Is that not asking a question, Asha? Or because I haven't experienced apple tea yet, I shouldn't even talk about it? I'll wait until I've been there. For fuck's sake. What a stupid point of view. You go through life like that. What? I mean, it just drives me. Anyway, let's carry on. So,
Turkey, hey, you finally got to get that butt lift.
Well, that's what Sanella said earlier. He's like, you must go there for a BBL. I think that's what it's called. So no, I didn't even know that was a thing. By the way, yesterday, the day before, Simpiwe and I got into a conversation about the Real Housewives Fun Pretoria, which is apparently starting soon, and which will be different because apparently, this is the first time they've called it fun something instead of. It's usually the Real Housewives of whatever. But I saw the trailer and I was like, yo, these people look like they've been all over the world for all kinds of surgeries and things. Apparently, there's some of these girls who have made their own fortunes and some of them who just married well. But you'd have to put a gun to my head to watch a show like that.
Yeah, well, it's just like we're not in that stage of life. But if you're a housewife that's looking to get a nose job or a butt lift, that'd be a great thing to watch. It's all about connection points, Gareth.
I'd quite like to watch a show, and I'm sure there are shows like this already, but like watch a show where someone really, really beautiful makes themselves ugly. Because, we're all equal. We're all supposed to be the same. You're not meant to judge people, blah, blah, blah. How come there are no shows where really pretty people go and make themselves ugly on purpose? Because it's too hard to be beautiful. Like, oh, I can't handle all these men looking at me all the time because I've got a beautiful body and I'm a gorgeous girl. I've got lovely hair and skin and I've got big tits. I'm going to have to go to the surgery this week and I'm going to make myself uglier. I'm going to ask the plastic surgeon to make me uglier because it's so difficult for me. Oh, I just hate being hit on the whole time. That's a show I would watch. That would be really funny. Of course, it never happens, right?
It would be one episode. The person would get bored, they would hate it, and then go, "Okay, I think this is a bad idea."
Yeah. But by then they look like Quasimodo, so it's too late.
Yeah.
All right. So I wanted to ask you. There are a couple of things we got to get into, and we don't want to run out of time this morning. So you had an agenda point which I thought was interesting. This idea of Instagram that is now offering an OnlyFans facility, which basically means they're just copying OnlyFans, and we know they copied Snapchat before that. With Reels and all of that stuff, right? So basically, Instagram is just like this big parasite that just sucks up all the ideas that anyone else comes up with. I mean, they've also copied TikTok, right? So Instagram sucks up all these ideas, and then, Mark Zuckerberg says, "Oh, well, now we've got the app to rule all apps." It's like Sauron's One Ring.
It is completely. And the reason why I wanted to chat with you about it is because with Elon Musk obviously going through with the whole Twitter sale, I think he wants to kind of get into that same sort of space where there's this amalgamation of all these super apps and tech things to make one thing. Because Instagram's business model is actually really, really smart. Like, well, Facebook, of course, because Facebook bought Instagram to start with. and then it just sort of enveloped everything that was cool about Snapchat. Reels and TikTok, all these kind of things. They were just putting it together. And then with the whole thing now about having subscription content, that is essentially OnlyFans model. And then I was thinking, like, they could at the same time, where they're on this juggernaut where they have no intention of innovating whatsoever, it's just enveloping ideas, they could basically take online dating and kill that tomorrow as well. Because they've got all the people on the thing already, right? All they have to do is put like a facility where you can like signal dating or whatever, and then maybe it's also like a paid up subscription thing where you can now go into this dating pool. Because they have all the people, they can use all the ideas. And it's actually really genius when you think about it.
They've also got all the money, so that helps too. So it's the old idea of like, the avalanche is caused by a small stone, and then that small stone gathers a whole bunch of others with the snow, and then it starts or mud if it's a landslide, and then it becomes so huge that it just sucks up everything around it, or like a black hole that just everything goes into.
Yes, just pulls in. Yeah.
So this is something which is inevitable. You have these huge gorillas in the room of media and social media in particular. And they just, because of their gravity, they just pull in all the little pieces. And eventually you'll have all the intellectual property in one big bundle. But I'm not understanding, are you in favor of this because it's going to happen inevitably? Or are you scared about this? Are you worried about this because you think it's going to crush the little people and creativity? And
no, because I think ultimately what kind of happens is that creativity will always live. And that's the one thing that means that we'll always be above robots. So that's great. So Instagram or whatever it is, they'll buy technologies. And a lot of people, when I know, cause I'm trying to create a tech platform, which is the hardest thing I've ever got into my whole life. Maybe I shouldn't have. But, technology and all that kind of stuff keeps growing. There's always a destination for it. But what is a bit sad is like it becomes like the whole Walmart effect. Is that once you build something so big and so huge, no one else wants to open anything. So I'm always like worried about these things becoming too big, because then people stop innovating. The moment people stop innovating, then you become like China. China's got a million engineers that come out of school, but they're not innovative people. They are just rinse, repeat droids of theory and practice.
I think about myself and the way that I respond whenever, Apple doesn't bring out this amazing update. Then I'm always like, oh, fuck you, Apple. But I've abdicated my responsibility for being creative to Apple. I could start, there's some apps that you can actually download to your phone where you can build your own app, and it could be to switch your lights on at home or whatever, stuff that maybe they've already done. But I could develop an app that schedules my day, for example. There are already apps like this available, but it would require me to put in the hours to actually program this thing, to put in various commands. And I'm not a coder, but I could probably learn that too. Instead, I'm like, oh no, I'll just wait for Apple to come up with something.
Yeah.
So I'm already like that. So I'm a hypocrite if I say, oh yeah, I'd like the creativity. But just to prove your point, Ben, creativity will always win.
It always has to.
I think this is so brilliant. You talked about dating apps as well, and now we've come full circle. So this is on South African Twitter, and I love this. Whoever this person is, we're going to try and get them on the show once I get back. But this is absolutely brilliant. You'll see what I mean about dating and about creativity. Look at this.
My name is Eskom Malahleni. I am originally from Medupi. I'm 99 years old. Yeah, some people like to say I'm not very bright. I tend to have a bit of a dark side. And I don't like people that are needy. Because when people need me too much, then I just switch off. I tend to have blackouts. They happen randomly. I'm a performer. So I love being on stages. You always find me on different stages.
So what are your turn-ons?
My what?
What turns you on?
Oh, what turns me on?
Yes.
Nothing. Okay, let's see what options you got for me. First one, generator. Okay. Candle. Mahala, I like them, but dark. Okaraka, yeah, man, he looks like he can keep the fire burning. Yeah, man, he's also a rapper, aka J. Cole. I like this one. Yeah, that is my type.
Oh my God, I think that's so brilliant. So there's Eskom looking for a date and very, very clever. You see, that's the sort of stuff that just gives me hope for humanity.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like the two things that I care most about in life is freedom and creativity. And it's interesting to see what Elon Musk is, because we all are guided towards these social platforms. That's just how it is, because we're so reliant on our phones. So in order for Elon to be the app X or whatever he's calling it, or maybe he's just trolling about it, but let's just say hypothetically he wants to buy Twitter in a move to take on the Instagram metaverse thingy. He'll have to do some real innovating to create something that's going to draw the audience, because as much as we are on our phones all the time, we've only got a certain amount of attention span to certain things, and that metaverse, universe, spectrum, whatever, is what has the most eyeballs. Obviously, TikTok's a major player in that, but it's just I never want to get to the point.
You mentioned China, Ben, but China did try to make the app to rule all apps, and it's called WeChat. And when we started Cliffs, we had quite a lot to do with them. And in China, it is the everything app. You do your payments, you schedule everything. Your whole life is basically run through this one app. Every bit of content that comes to you through that app, and it's massive, 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 massive in China. So it's already been attempted there on that scale, which is it's nothing to smirk at. So I don't know. I don't know if I want this. Maybe it is inevitable. I just like a little bit of competition, because I do think that also breeds the creativity. If you don't have, someone who's hungry to get in, then it's only going to be the same old tired people who run things, and ultimately the thing atrophies. So I think if you have lots of competition, then you have improvement. Like Eskom, again, to to kind of talk in a meta way about this whole thing, is that Eskom is a perfect example of a monopoly that's just become really, really terrible over time. If we had 20 different power producers in South Africa, they'd all be competing with each other, trying to outperform each other, trying to deliver a service at less cost to the consumer. We wouldn't have the situation we have now, and they'd be run by different people, and the ones who ran their company the best would win.
Well, I could be mistaken on this one, but I think how it works in Australia is that they have a demand. So there's like a number, which is like however much the country needs to be powered. And then there's all the different sources that then get to like bid or like offer how much they're going to offer to make that number. So whether it's wind, it's coal powered, solar, whatever, they can then put their bids towards how this number is getting. Let's just say it's 100 mega kilowatts, whatever those things are. However they can fill that number up, it becomes a bidding war, and they get service like that.
I'm only interested in wind power. Only wind.
Well, there's enough of that. There really is so much of it.
All right. Well, let's see what happens. But I'm not really excited about the future of Silicon Valley, the way that it's constituted at the moment. And it's also because we've all opted in and now we're stuck in it. And everybody who says, "Oh, I hate social media," including me, we always have the option to get off. You always have that option. And how many people take it? Hardly anyone.
You do, but like with all drugs, right? What are you substituting it with? What are you going else? Because we all become addictive. We're hugely addictive people.
Yeah.
What is that thing? Like, I'm trying to add extra little things now. Like, I started to play paddle because there's paddle courts across the road now. So I'm going to go do that twice a week.
Nice.
Because I'm on Instagram far too much because I live alone, and the power goes out. You can't watch TV. You don't go out as much as you used to because Eskom and all that kind of crap. So you just scroll through this Instagram bullshit. And then if that becomes bigger and bigger and takes on more parts of your life, then you're stuck in the system. So find out what's significant on the outside as well, and just keep plugging away, because we can't keep buying into these apps. They're going to get bigger. They're going to become more controlling. And with that, we'll become less significant.
You said it just now. You have to replace one addiction with another.
But it has to be a better one.
Maybe not replace an addiction with another addiction, but you have to fill that gap that the addiction leaves. And maybe you do it with a bunch of different little things that you're not addicted to, but that fill up your time. and take you away from your addiction, or you just replace it with, most people. I don't think I'm being insulting here. A lot of people who get off of pills or alcohol or gambling or sex addiction or whatever, they replace it with God. And that's
often happens. Yeah,
that's a one fits all solution for some people, because it's not necessarily very well defined, and it can be given credit or attributed importance wherever there's a gap. Who knows? The God of the gaps is something humans have spoken about for centuries. Anyway, it's 7:00. We got to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment or two. We've got lots of other good stuff to get to. If you want to get hold of us, contact at cliffcentral.com or WhatsApp us on 071 783 6214 with your voice note. You can also join us in the comments.
Up next in the Auto Trader podcast, it's more the maintenance of the car that is a cost of ownership rather than the actual maintenance plan. The maintenance plan is really just trying to peg that number, rather than it biting them. You know,
correct.
Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
It's the decade that just won't go away, mainly because we won't let it. It's That 80s Show, the show that taste forgot. Every Friday, Paolo and Dory remember the 80s. Movies, music, fashion, wham, beachies, and the half. If it was acceptable in the 80s, it will get you cancelled today. That 80s Show, new episode every Friday, live or as a podcast on cliffcentral.com.
All right. It is Friday morning. We've got a really good show ahead for you because, how can I say that with confidence? Well, you've got Rob van Vuuren joining us. He, of course, is one of South Africa's most well-known, funny people. He's a creative genius. He's also made all kinds of amazing TV. And he's an actor. He's a serious actor as well, which is always cool because I love talking to people who can do a bunch of different things well. They always say that horrible line. I hate this line. They call you a jack of all trades and a master of none, right? But once upon a time, and these are among the people who we still use the word genius when we attribute anything to them. Once upon a time, a Renaissance man was exactly that. Not a jack of all trades and a master of none, but a master of many things. You know, Leonardo da Vinci, he could paint, he could draw, he could sculpt, he could invent, he could write backwards. He was absolutely incredible at a bunch of things. He also designed buildings. He also did whatever he had to do to make a living, whether it was working for the French king or whether it was working for the Pope. And he ran a business, a school of other artists. So you can call Leonardo da Vinci a jack of all trades, but I don't think you can call him a master of none. And a Renaissance man, or what's the other word that they use? A polymath. This is something to aspire to, not something to mock. I don't know when when humans started to use that jack of all trades thing. But look at Elon Musk, since he's always in the news and we're always talking about him. And I've got a comment here from Elon is God this morning. There seem to be a lot of connections being made today. This guy's, he's got, all these different businesses, and he's clearly interested in many different things. You can't call him a jack of all trades and master of none. It seems to me he's been fairly successful. Anyway, I like that terminology of kind of Renaissance men polymaths. So Elon is God says, do you think that these TikTok people would commit mass suicide if the US would ban TikTok? Now, that would be a really interesting social experiment. How far would a TikTok star go to stay on TikTok? Would they move to China? Would they really sacrifice their life in the US, for example? If the United States suddenly decided to ban TikTok, would that be the final straw that would break the camel's back and would make some person in their 20s who lives in their parents' house and has a very cushy life, would it suddenly make them go, oh, no, I'm not doing this. I'm moving immediately. I'm going to China because I need TikTok that badly. I wonder. That would be a fascinating thing to talk about. We can maybe get into that a little later on. Something I wanted to talk about, and I think Ben's making coffee. We got Rob van Vuuren coming up just now. Something I wanted to talk about this morning, and maybe you can help me answer this too. As you grow up, you kind of change your perspective on who you really look up to. And that's obviously happened for, if you think about your own life. The people you looked up to, the heroes that you had in your 20s, are not the heroes you have when you're in your 30s or your 40s. And I wonder how those have changed. I'd love to know if you have a very stark contrast between the kind of people that you idolized when you were 25 and the kind of people you might idolize 10 years later, 20 years later. Because I think we change our opinion. I was talking to someone yesterday, a very good friend of mine, and someone who I do respect enormously. He's very, very clever. He's always watching what's going on in the world, paying attention to the trends and, all the important things that are happening. And I just wondered if, this guy, sorry, I read a message, so I was distracted for a second. Where are you, Ben? I can't see you. It's like your camera's gone. Yeah, but your camera's gone dead. That's why I didn't know where you were.
That's weird. I can see me on the screen. It even says here, you're in the show. Everyone can see and hear you.
No, we can't see you. It's just a black screen. Have you given away your soul to the devil?
Yeah, Black Lives Matter, Gareth.
Okay, do me a favor. Go out and come back in. There we go. And while he's doing that, just reset the link. Because he's sending me a message now. He's like, I'm in here, but I don't know why I'm not on the show. Okay, well, we'll try and get him back on. So who did you look up to in your 20s that you don't look up to anymore? Or who have you replaced them with? That's bound to be all about your development, your character as a human being. Have you got better? Have you got worse? Everybody thinks they're getting better, but maybe you haven't. Did you replace someone who was quite good with someone who was quite bad? Who do you look up to now, as opposed to the people that you looked up to when you were much younger than that, perhaps? Twitter experience. You're giving Bill Gates an idea to thin out the herd. Great place to start. What are you talking about? The idea of TikTok being banned in the US, and then, well, it won't happen. But if it did happen, there's Ben. All right, we got you back.
All right.
I asked this question earlier with two things I want your opinion on. The first one is, and it was a comment from one of the listeners, Elon is God, said, if we banned TikTok in the US, do you think people they'd move to China, or do you think mostly they'd just complain a lot and then find something new?
They would complain for a few days, eat junk food, and then just go on to whatever the next thing is. It's going to take their time. You move to China, you don't it's not the same thing. You move to China, firstly they'll lock you up because they might suspect you smell like COVID. And then TikTok they don't want your noise. They don't want you dancing unless you're educating the kids and bettering the people. They don't want your TikTok. You
Yeah,
think
exactly.
someone with like purple hair and anxiety problems is going to be a hit in China? Whatever.
All right. So heroes. Who did you look up to in your 20s that you don't look up to anymore, and who have you replaced them with?
Well, I used to watch a lot of sport, obviously, but the weird thing was I never really had sporting heroes. I mean, obviously, we've spoken about this at length. You know, South Africa's hero is Gary Player, and he will forever be someone that everyone looks up to because he's
Yes.
just achieved the most. You know, he's the biggest winner. He's the absolute biggest winner. It's just such a weird thing that because people always say, "Oh, but you got to have heroes." I've never actually had heroes. I got people that I admire. Yeah, it's a weird thing though. Actually, I've never ever gone by because I mean I've met sports people, right? Which is the biggest mistake to ever make. Don't do it because they could only be disappointed. And it's absolutely no slight on their part. It's just that we elevate them so much more. Same with celebrities, all celebrities. We elevate them so much more than they ever want to be elevated deep down. So when it comes to actually talking to them as people, they'll only ever disappoint themselves and you. So. Yeah, having heroes is a weird thing. Like, Gareth, I think I've just never had it because I've always just been too curious about finding out stuff by myself. Maybe it's the narcissist in me. Maybe I'm my own hero. I'm trying to be. I'm trying to be anyway.
Well, luckily for you, Kieran says he looks up to the both of us because we're degenerates. Okay, great.
Nice.
Thanks. Very nice, Kieran. Thank you. I looked up to
Lovely.
I looked up to Billy Joe Armstrong from Green Day, and I still do, says Ryan. Okay, well, some people stay. I also don't. I don't think I have heroes either. You know, I mean, if you like football, then you have a football hero in inverted commas. If you like, let's talk philosophers, then maybe your favorite philosopher is, I don't know, Immanuel Kant. But I have like different people. Immanuel Kant, Ben. Didn't you hear me properly? Immanuel Kant.
Sure. School must have been tough for that guy.
Ben is signed professional. Last week he was in a gown. This week he fucks off to get tea. Yeah, exactly. Good point.
I was in the waiting room the whole time. It's the tech that failed you guys, not me. Stop being
George agrees. Listen, George agrees. George says, I'm with Ben. There are people who have parts of themselves or have achieved things I want to learn. But for me, hero means you want to be that person. If that's the case, then you have to take the bad as well.
Yeah, George is always so smart with these things. And that's why I was going to ask. I mean, like, what is the purpose of a hero? As a kid, we have superheroes because we watch those things because they're going to save the world if the bad man comes. But when you realize that no one's saving you from the bad man, as in like government, tax, all those actual real evils, then you realize you got to be your own hero.
Well, that's also why I think a lot of very stupid people these days have watched superhero movies and they think that there are perfect people in the world, and then they go around complaining about history, and they're like, oh well. George Washington, he may have founded the United States and he might have been their first president and only done one term, but he kept slaves. So we got to pull down every one of his statues. Like he was going to be perfect in some way, And I think that's just such a childish way of looking at the world. And probably those are the same people who do actually have heroes and want to actually be those people. And usually they're not real people. They've got an idea of them in their heads because everyone's a little bit of bad and good. Maybe that's also maybe as you grow up, you start to see that some people have some very ugly characteristics that you used to just gloss over, and then you eventually can't anymore. I don't know. Immanuel Kant, there he comes again. He just keeps intervening in this conversation. Let's just have a look here. Jesus has always been my boo, says Lighthouse Papa. David Attenborough says Dud's best human ever.
Yes, he's definitely up there.
What would David Attenborough, like he's 96 or something years old. What would you have to discover about David Attenborough for you to be completely horrified and change your opinion that he's not a great human being? What could be said about him suddenly if it was revealed that he was, I don't know, a serial killer? Would that change your opinion about him?
Well, serial killing. Yeah, look, Gareth. The answer is always interfering with kids. If he's traveling the world doing nature programs while also like diddling pygmy children, legacy ruined.
Yeah.
If he was out murdering people because of conservation rights, then he'd be like the Dexter of the natural world. Imagine David Attenborough going, "I've been coming to these lands for 100 years. These fuckers keep polluting this river, so I've had to skin all of them." It would be like, okay, there goes Dave, doing the world's work. It would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
But if he's like, "I've been coming to this forest for 20 years and these kids are fucking sexy," it would be the worst thing. Absolute worst thing.
Yeah, I do think so. You're right. That would always just really blacken someone's name in the history books, is like interfering with children. You're right.
It's the worst. We've always said this. This is maybe why we have some strange humor towards it. But it's the worst crime in the world. It's just the worst thing to do as a human being. It means you are the lowest of low.
Yeah. You're bursting a lot of bubbles this morning, says Anna Marie. Are we? Sorry. Carl was very funny earlier. We were talking about developing your own app and the app to rule all apps, right? So he says, if I don't take the time to actually develop my own app, am I apathetic? Which I thought was pretty clever. Sometimes he's clever, sometimes he's not. All right, let us welcome someone who I love having on the show and someone who's always good to see. Are you on your way, Ben? Cheers.
Yeah, I got it going. Bye, Gareth.
Right.
Have a lovely weekend. Bye, everybody.
No worries. Cheers, Ben. So I'm thrilled to have Rob van Vuuren with us again. He, of course, is a comedic genius. He's also a brilliant actor and a really creative person, someone who's done incredible things. I first got to know about him from the Most Amazing Show, which he was Twaki in, and I will admit right from the start, I loved every single thing that Corneille and Twaki did. I thought it was just absolutely brilliant. And I know some stuff, ages really well when you look at it, and some stuff just looks horribly out of place. I still think that the Most Amazing Show would look hilarious today, just like it did in those days. But maybe he disagrees. Either way, he's also presented a bunch of TV shows. He's been on Strictly Come Dancing. He did the Crazy Games, directed a bunch of plays, which a lot of people don't know, and also co-hosted his first 2 seasons of SA's Got Talent. He has also done a bunch of really impressive acting. He's been in a couple of movies. He's also starred in a drama miniseries on SABC1 called The Kingdom, which, of course, was very successful. And he joined the main cast of the 2020 Netflix crime drama, which is called Queen Sono. And his new live comedy show is called Rob van Vuuren is Still Standing. Rob, you're not that old that you need to use pejorative language when you're referring to yourself. Of course, you're still standing. Where else would you be? How are you, man?
I'm good, Gareth. How are you?
Lekker. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, man. I think after the last 2.5 years, I think any of us could be grateful to still be standing. It's been a rough ride.
Yeah, funny. We were talking about this with Robbie Collins just last week, and he was saying how many ups and downs everybody's been through. Whether you're in the entertainment business, which I'm saying using a general term like the entertainment business, but in your case, very specifically, also comedy. It took a huge hit during this time. And I think everybody, whatever business you were in, unless you were selling PPE, it was the worst time ever. Everybody was like, fuck, let's get back to normal. This is awful. And I think it's starting to creep back. Are you back to doing all the things you want to do full time?
Yes. I mean, it was a very interesting time for me in many ways. Like live stuff was obviously the most heavily affected. I mean, we only went to full capacity of venues at the end of June. I was at the National Arts Festival, and I think halfway through the festival was the first time we were allowed full capacity audiences, which is kind of crazy. So the live aspect of the industry has been completely decimated. It's coming back now, and it's people are hungry for it, and it's so great to be playing to actual human beings and not doing online comedy, which was hell. But what was interesting about it is it really helped my film career out, because the film industry was one of the first kind of cogs of the entertainment industry to get up and running again and to adapt to the protocols. And in the past, I'd always kind of struggled to get my film career going, and I worried that maybe it was just because I was cuck on camera. But it turns out I wasn't cuck. I was just unavailable.
No, you were not cuck at all. In fact, I've got a very nice compliment for you right up front here. I mean, it's, I always do this to make the guests feel great, but it's not me. It's one of our listeners. Carla says, Rob, your performance in Ludic along with Arnold Vosloo blew my mind. Well done, and thank you for all the excellent entertainment. You see, this is something I said before you came on this morning, and I want to hear your take on it. There seems to be, there are two schools of thought on this. Either you're denigrated by certain people by them using this term jack of all trades and master of none, which I hate. I mean, I'll be clear about my preference in this respect. And then there are those people who say, well, you want to be good at as many things as possible. And the jack of all trades thing is very dismissive because you could be a master of many things. And you clearly are. I mean, you can be a very serious actor, which requires a totally different skill set in some ways to the kind of skill set that you have when you stand up comedy. When you're writing things, when you're directing things, these are all very, very different things. You do all of them well. And they used to call that a polymath or a Renaissance man. And whether it's, painting, sculpting, drawing, writing, inventing, which was like a Leonardo da Vinci's, box of skills. In your case, you've got directing, acting, performing, writing, and all of those things are very, very different. And you're bloody good at all of them. So how do you feel when people say, oh, well, Rob's a, because I'm sure there are people who've said that, maybe people who are jealous that they can't do all those things. They've only got the one. They're a one-trick pony, to use another pejorative. But how do you feel about that? Do you think it's important in one life to try and cover as much ground as you can so that your life really has meaning and you explore all the different things? You might find something totally outside of your current environment that really inspires you, that fills up a huge gap in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the keys to a fulfilling and happy existence is curiosity, and if you're truly curious, you're going to investigate and you're going to learn as much as you possibly can with your limited time here. And if you're a good learner and you're dedicated, you're going to become good at the things that you learn. And I don't think you need to set a limitation on that. That quote is also, it's so often misquoted because it's not the full quote. The original quote ends with a jack of all trades
and a master of none.
And a master of none is oftentimes better than a master of one.
Aha. Correct.
That's
right.
The actual full quote, and I think that stands true. If you're the kind of person who approaches everything with like a dedicated curiosity and a passion, you're going to become better at many things than a person who isn't interested and curious is at that one thing that they claim to be a master of.
Yes, but also. It's you don't be afraid of failure. Like we keep being told this, but people don't put this into their own world, So you might want to try your hand at, and I'm not saying you should do this with brain surgery, but if you, for example, think that it might be fun to paint and you've never painted before, give it a go. What's the worst that can happen is you paint a shit painting and everyone laughs and you move on. Yeah. At least you've tried it. Imagine getting to the end of your life and going, oh, I really wanted to mix poultices like an apothecary from the 1400s, and I never got to do that. And now, at the end of my life, maybe that was your thing. You could have been like an old school apothecary. God alone knows there might be a demand for something like that, but you never did it, so you never got to fulfill your life. You die unhappy. How awful is that?
Yeah, I think failure. We've got such a fear of failure in society, and it's so vitally important to have any kind of success. You have to fail. It's the vital ingredient to success, and I'm very grateful for that lesson, especially in stand-up comedy, because failure is unavoidable. There is no way you fly through it. So, it's the bad gigs, it's the failures where you learn stuff. That's where you.
Well, I mean, here's someone who says Rob's best performance was in Knysna during load shedding, a storm. But we filled up a venue and used phones for lighting. He performed for 2 hours. What a legend. Dude, that's incredible.
I remember that show. That was a fun show. That was good. Thank you.
Wow. All right, so
what I wanted to say, Gareth, is I also don't want to do lots of different things, but I do think there's a common thread through them. For me, it all comes down to storytelling and a love for storytelling. So I certainly have followed a particular path in terms of what is my passion and what I am good at. But what I've found is that within that path, if you kind of could distill it to its most basic form, it can go into so many different directions. So, if I'm working as a director or a writer or a performer, as a stand-up, as an actor, it's still coming out from that basic kind of kernel of passion, which is storytelling.
I love that. I just feel it's been watered down so horribly by people in the media and business world, because everyone thinks that storytelling is something that they have the ability to do. Now, you undoubtedly have that ability. There are a few people who I just love to listen to and watch, and they could tell me any story. They could tell me the most boring story ever, and I'd be captivated. But then you get these, ad agencies and these people in business, and people in the media, and they're like, we have a story to tell you. And then you watch or listen to their story, and you're like, oh my God, I'll never, that's an hour of my life I'll never get back. And it was all to sell me this this cough medicine. And you feel like you've been robbed. I think that storytelling, while every human has the ability to tell stories, the people who really tell them well, like you, are like real diamonds, dude. And they're not easy to find. And everybody now, because we're all content creators. No, because we're all. I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass all of that. Everyone now is a content creator, so they all assume that automatically they're also storytellers, and they're not.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I think we have like unlimited access to an audience all the time. So yeah, you do tend to think that you're performing all the time, and that you can.
My favorite is someone who has like 50 followers on Instagram, and they're like, oh, I just want to let my fans know I'll be taking this week off of social media. And I think, oh, well, thank fuck you told me that, because now how am I going to fill up my podcast playlist without you there? It's going to be.
We'll alert the UN. Thank you very much.
All right, so what's this latest show? Tell me about that.
The Color mentioned Ludic on Netflix, which I just wanted to say thank you so much, Color, for watching it and for the support. That was a huge deal for me. It was Netflix's first Afrikaans original. A crime drama with Arnold Vosloo, to get to perform on screen alongside Arnold, and to get to hang with him and spend time with him and listen to his stories and have a few drinks after a day of shooting was an experience I will cherish for the rest of my life. It was absolutely amazing. But the story of getting that part for me was quite incredible, because it was during lockdown. I started getting requests for a self-tape through for an Afrikaans drama series, which I never get. I very rarely get to work in drama because people perceive me as a comedian, and in Afrikaans, which I don't get to work in as well. And I was really intrigued by it. I sent through the self-tapes. Then I got a request to say they really love you for that.
I want to ask you about that. How does that actually work? Do you have someone filming it for you, or you just put a camera on? No. Because it must be so awkward to record these tapes. Someone posted something yesterday. She's an actress I know. She's been a guest on the show once or twice. She was asked to do like a reaction video of like a fight going on. So she was sitting there going, and she said she felt so stupid doing it. And it looked crazy because without the context, and an actor has to be able to imagine the stuff first.
We get to do the weirdest things in those things. It can be super, super awkward. I remember once helping out with an audition for a movie called Shark Attack 2, where we had a bunch of woman come in to audition for the lead sister, and the scene that they had to play out was the two sisters were windsurfing, and one of them gets knocked by a shark and then eaten by the shark. So that's the scene they have to play out in this tiny little studio, standing there miming windsurfing and then getting eaten by a shark. So we end up doing really, really bizarre things. But that's like normally in a studio. During lockdown, we had to do it ourselves. So yeah, I've done some on my own, which are really not great. But the secret to my self-tape success is actually Lo Fenter, aka Cornet from The Most Amazing Show, he lives like across the valley from me in Clovelly, and I go over and we set it up in his studio, and he films it for me, and he plays all the other characters. He laughs at me all the time, even when I'm doing dramatic stuff. But I have a good hit rate when I do it with Lo.
You know how many of us would pay money just to see that going on, that you being filmed by him and him reacting to you? Because I wouldn't be able to I'm
crying and he's like laughing his ass off at me. But I mean, I got that part. So I got a request to do another self-tape for this character called Swayze, who I didn't even know. I had no context for the whole show. I didn't know what it was. It was this very dramatic scene where he's about to relapse. He's been clean for like 2 years, and he phones AA and breaks out crying. So I go do this self-tape at Lo's house, nail it, even though Lo's laughing at me. And then I send it through and I get the part. And then I read this script, and it's this 6 episodes of just like the coolest, grittiest, edgy Afrikaans, South African crime drama. And the part that I'm playing is like number 2 next to Arnold Vosloo. It's this incredible dramatic arc. I remember reading through it, and as I finished the 6th script, I read through the night. I just like closed my iPad and started crying. I was just like, oh my God, I've been waiting my whole life for a part like this. So the opportunity was huge for me, and I grabbed it with both hands. I had an absolute joy doing it.
Let's explain to those of us who've never been in the world of serious acting, especially film, because we all have an idea of what happens, you know, auditions and all that stuff. But you just explained the self-tape thing. Now, who are the people who watch that tape, and what are they actually looking for? Because it seems like a little bit unnecessary. Like, surely if you just sit in the room with the guy, what are they looking for in a tape like that? Because how much can possibly come through when it's you sitting there in this room and, you know, Lo is busy filming you and you're trying to show depth of, I don't know, your depth of ability to get into, to inhabit this character. Like, well, how does it work for the person who's receiving this tape? What are they looking for?
I guess, you know, the people who are receiving it is normally there'll be a casting director, but it's ultimately going through to the director and the producers. And they will have quite a specific thing in mind in terms of what they're looking for that character. That'll incorporate age and a look of feel.
Really, the brilliant producers like Harvey Weinstein, he would actually have you come into his room while he was in his robe, and that was how he cast his movies. So I'm just trying to see how the tape works. It doesn't make sense to me.
How did you know? And that's how I got the part.
No, well, I mean,
my secret's out.
Oh God, I think about old Hollywood and how it must have worked then, because it was obviously just a way for these creepy producers back in like the early days, the 50s, the 60s. You know, these guys must have just like lined up all the prettiest girls in town, and they would just come in for casting. And they met them, then they dated them, and it was all perfectly okay. And then somewhere we decided, quite rightly, no, that's not on anymore. And then eventually we got to a point where the poor casting director is receiving a tape from you that's been filmed by Lo.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, no, look, we still go in studio sometimes, and that's always better when you can feel the person's energy in the room. But ultimately, they're looking for someone who can, if it's a dramatic part and there's a particularly big dramatic moment, can that person actually do it? Can they get there under pressure? Because on a film set, you don't have a lot of time. got to go quickly. You're shooting out a sequence all the time. I mean, the first scene that I shot on Ludik was, I arrived that morning. We like raced around and I got into costume, doing different layers of makeup for me for the torture scenes that I'd experienced. And then the first scene is like next to a graveyard after a like 3-day coke bender and alcohol binge after having been tortured, and then breaking down at my dead wife's grave. Like that's literally the first thing I shot.
What a song.
Yeah, so they got to be confident that the person can go there when you need them to.
And of course, another thing about this, which those of us like me who don't know about the film business don't get, is that none of it is chronological. Like they expect your character. You're the character at the end of the thing, sometimes at the beginning. So you haven't even gone through all of the stuff that you should go through to get to the point where you're this broken person, maybe right at the end, or whatever it is.
Yeah, so that's all about preparation. You know, it's like really reading the script really carefully and plotting out your journey and where you would be emotionally, and trying to kind of contextualize that for yourself each scene. So I did this whole little book where I was doing the different scenes and kind of going, okay, this is what's happened to him, this is what's going to happen to him, and then also just being aware of when I would be shooting those scenes, so that when I came into it, it wasn't kind of cold. Because when they assemble it, it's got to make sense. It's got to feel like you are on a particular journey. So it was challenging, but such a great challenge. I loved it.
So you still haven't told me what your stand-up show is about, but we'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
No, we'll get there now.
Okay.
While we're on this, because I can hear you really, you're loving this, and doing this film stuff is really like this is your new thing, and you're clearly very good at it, and you enjoy it, and all that stuff. Has it got to the point though where you look around and you go, okay, this is South Africa. Our opportunities here are much more limited in that business. There are not as many things going on for a dramatic actor, or even if you wanted to do comedy, that too. You've done most of the things you can do here. Has it started to get to that point where people are saying to you, don't you want to go overseas? Or have you thought to yourself, I want to get out of here and I want to go and try my hand at, Los Angeles or New York, or God forbid, something like Bollywood or Nollywood, if that was more your thing. But people do think that way because largely, Rob, from the outside, it looks like you've conquered a lot of this stuff already. Are you feeling a bit hemmed in?
That's an interesting question. I think in South Africa there was definitely more of a ceiling, in the past, and even just in the recent history, the last 5 to 10 years, than there is now. And that's been a question that people have posed to me throughout my career. I never went that way because I was so excited about what I could do here, and it was home, and I loved the scene. I loved the theatre scene, and that's where I kind of got into it. But I've gotten to the point now where if I were to go overseas, I'd have to start almost from scratch. Sure, I'd bring my experience with me, and I'd bring a certain reputation, but it would mean nothing in the States or in the UK to a certain degree. And we're at the place where there's so much more stuff being shot here, and with streaming and so many different channels, I've actually got more of an opportunity to go global staying here, I think, than I would if I went there. So that for me is kind of the what I'm hoping to do, is to keep working here, but to be able to export globally, whether that's with live stuff and touring shows, which I've done to a certain degree, doing festivals, doing Edinburgh, Amsterdam, things like that, but then always coming back home. And I think with film stuff, I get the sense that that's kind of the trajectory I'm hoping to do, is to do more stuff that exports globally and that shoots here, that is for a global audience. Like I did a short scene on the Mauritanian where I got to share the screen with Jodie Foster.
Jesus, wow.
And I don't think I would have had that opportunity if I'd been in the States, because the pool of competition is so much bigger. Whereas I've established myself here. So when I walk into a casting studio here, I've actually got a better opportunity. And I mean, like, it wasn't a huge part, but it was Jodie fucking Foster, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you were in LA and Jodie Foster was your next door neighbor and she had to film your self-tape, it wouldn't be nearly as good as if you did it with Lo, you know? So that makes sense. Makes perfect sense. All right. So just to go back to my obsession, which I can only give you all the credit or blame for, Corneille and Twaki. So Michael lives in Switzerland, and he says, I forced my German girlfriend, her to watch Corneille and Twaki, and she didn't get it at all. But the Toilet of Truth, she thinks is the best and the most honest material ever. The Toilet of Truth. Fuck, that's great. That is so great. Have you put them away? Corneille and Twaki, you finished with them?
No, we actually did shows this year. They kind of got resurrected during lockdown because we were desperate. So we started doing online shows.
You only needed each other to make that work, right? So if you and he were together in a room, then Corneille and Twaki are there. You don't need other people. You don't need.
Dude, in the beginning, the first couple of shows, we weren't even in the same room. We did full shows like this, like we are now, and we figured out all the little tricks of it. Was a fascinating process of going, okay, these are the limitations of the medium. How do we make it like a compelling double act comedy show for an hour with this? So we like figured out things like the orientation of the camera. So if we'd like be able to talk to each other like that, as if we were in the same room, like I'm talking to you now. We did like a little puppet show with our Corneille and Twaki figurines, which we would pass to each other through the camera, and then he would pick it up. It was so much fun. And then because we had so much fun, we decided to do some live shows when the restrictions were lifted, and it was amazing. We had so much fun, but the audience as well, it had the same kind of hysteria that our live shows created back in in the early 2000s. It had that same kind of madness to it, which was rad. It was really, really fun.
Okay, so Annette's asking what a lot of people want to know. Where can I watch all of this? Is there a whole channel on YouTube, or have people just... There is
some stuff on YouTube. There's the famous How to Make Sex on Natalie Portman sketch.
All right. Okay. But it's not. Are these people who've lifted this stuff off of you guys, or is it your official channel that you put?
It's stuff that it was our channel that we were making a while ago, but then we lost the login details and the password, so we got. You can see it. It's there. We've got an Instagram page as well, and if you follow myself on Instagram, I'll update stuff. So we are doing live shows, which I think we'll do some more of. We put it there.
All right.
But the stuff on film, like I've got some of the DVDs of the second season of the TV show, but otherwise it's quite scarce actually.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to find. I'm just glad that there is some, so I'll go and look for it after the show. All right, let's talk about your stand-up show, because this is what's new and this is what you're up to at the moment. And it's called Rob van Vuuren Still Standing. So how do you choose material for this? And listen, there's such a glut of stuff out there at the moment. People are all desperate to fill up venues. I'm sure you don't have any problem doing that. But what are you going to be talking about? Like, what's the gist of it? I know you probably hate it because it's like saying, well, tell me about yourself in 5 lines. It's like that.
No, it's actually. I think it's pretty on topic for some of the things that you've been talking about, especially the conversation you were having about heroes. So first of all, the show is very much a kind of a personal retrospective of all the traumatic things that have happened to me over the last 2.5 years. I mean, global pandemic notwithstanding. I mean, that's the kind of basic context from which we're all coming from. I got separated at the end of 2020, the end of a really incredible marriage of someone that I love deeply. We went through a very intense process of conscious uncoupling to retain our friendship and retain the kind of our family integrity, which is an incredible process.
You have kids?
Yes, we have an 11-year-old. We also managed to get hijacked during lockdown in Gugulethu when there was a lifting of restrictions, and we went through. Myself and Danny went through to Gugs to do a reading of our children's book and do a book giveaway, and we decided it would be a good idea to take our daughter with us. Because we are idiots, and then we ended up being hijacked, which was traumatic and terrifying. I went to a gig where someone was literally actually murdered. I went to, and I think probably the most traumatic of all, I did online comedy while my mother knitted in bed next to me.
My God!
So it's a very personal account of those experiences, but don't get me wrong, it's funny. It's really, really funny. I found a way to process all of that trauma, and it's been really, really cathartic and beautiful. I did ayahuasca. That helped as well.
Nice. Okay, yeah.
And now I'm not sure if this is actually happening.
Pull that face again, because that's exactly what it is.
I'm melting.
Did you have because there's some people I know who've done this, and they say, "Oh no, it's changed my whole appreciation of life, and I'm suddenly I know all living things are connected and all of this stuff." Or was it, some kind of, okay, well, that was an interesting realization or an interesting insight, or did it just feel like a fun experience? What are the levels?
It was a super, super intense. Super intense experience. I did 2 ceremonies. The first ceremony was 2 hours of bliss, followed by 4 hours of terror upon terror.
Really?
Incredibly traumatic and intense, but very, very, very cathartic and very healing in a way that I didn't expect, and that was incredibly helpful for me. I came away with it ultimately just with an enormous amount of compassion for myself and for people close to me and for just people in general, which I found very, very helpful for my own healing. I will say, though, that I wouldn't recommend it as
it's not
just something to do. It's not a recreational thing.
It's really not something you do to get high with your friends. This is like a proper...
it's proper deep trauma release. And if you are going to do it, make sure you're doing it with the right people, and also support yourself in your life around that. Like, make sure that you've got therapy, that you have a therapist set up, and that you're going to therapy regularly. Make sure that you're doing the kinds of self-care things that keep you grounded and help you integrate. And it's a big thing. I wouldn't recommend it, but you'd have to come to my show to hear me talk more about that experience. Okay. Getting back to the show, that's one of the things I cover. So it's all these like really traumatic things, but in a way that's been really cathartic and that people have responded to and related to. But the kernel of the show really came when, and this is relating to the hero conversation, came a couple of years ago. I was going through a depression that I did not realize I was experiencing at the time. And I was doing a gig where there was a motivational speaker speaking. And when I saw this motivational speaker speak, I immediately thought to myself, oh, now I really want to kill myself. Because before, I didn't know I was depressed. Now I knew how depressed I was and why. And it was, and I just remember, it's one of those motivational, the kind of person who feels like compelled to paddle to Madagascar and back in a boat made out of wet wipes. Yeah. With just like a tea strainer for an oar.
And they're so optimistic and positive, and they I know it's meant to make you feel good, but it can sometimes be like, oh Jesus.
It's also like it's these people who are putting themselves willfully under these really strenuous circumstances, which is really like a 2.5-year adventure holiday, to come back and then get paid enormous amounts of money on the corporate speaker tour to tell us how cuck our lives are because we didn't do the mad cuck that they did.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, and it was weird because it was at like an AGM for a group of farmers in the Robertson area. And I remember thinking, I just can't relate to the story this guy's telling. And then I'm looking at the farmers and going, they're thinking the same thing. I mean, these are people who are getting up every day before sunrise. They've got one of the toughest jobs on the planet. And he has a guy who's, run across the Antarctic. It's like, it doesn't make any sense to me. I couldn't relate to that as a hero. And I thought to myself, like, oh, who are my heroes? Who do I really look up to? And then I think lockdown in a way and the pandemic illustrated it so beautifully because I realized it was just normal people, normal everyday people, essential service kind of illustrated that, like nurses, teachers, doctors, the teller at the checkers, normal people who are surviving this chaos and this terrifying existence. And so that for me, those are the true heroes. It's like just people, man. Normal people who get up every day and don't be a dick and manage to get through the day with love.
Well, listen, I am thrilled that you are back on stage doing some stand-up. We will all be there to watch it. Rob van Vuuren is still standing. You can get all the details on
It's on the 20th and the 20th to the 22nd of October. I'm doing 3 shows at the Corpus Theatre, and we are filming it for my hour-long special, which I'm excited about. And Gareth, you must catch me on Comedy Central.
Yes.
Where I talk about a lot about these things as well. It's on, what is it on? Channel 122, Tuesdays and Sundays at 10, Comedy Central Live. Savannah and Comedy Central have been taking comedy back to the communities, and it's been amazing. It was an amazing initiative and experience. We talk a lot about mental health, and it's been a great way to get back on stage and in front of South Africans. And they've got an incredible lineup on Comedy Central as well. So catch that Tuesdays and Sundays. But come to my show. Rob van Vuuren is still standing, Corpus Theatre, and also somewhere near you. I'm probably going to take it on tour.
Good man. Nice to see you, dude. And thank you so much for all the amazing work you do, keeping the rest of us sane and smiling.
Thank you, Gareth. I love you.
Cheers, bro. Bye-bye. There we go. Rob van Vuuren, everybody. Which brings me to my favorite part of a Friday, which is when George joins us, because it truly means the weekend is upon us. George Mienie, how the hell are you?
Hey, Gareth Cliff. I hurt my back last night. I mean, I don't complain very often, but you start to realize that you age.
Are you sitting there right now going, wincing every time you move?
It's something like that. I literally, every time I turned in the night, I woke up. But it's my own fault. I did some gym last night, and the exercise bent over rowing, where you bend over the bar and somehow that exercise just got to my back. So I'm hoping it's muscular and it's nothing worse. But so I'll give it a day or two and just give me an excuse to, be on the couch on the weekend.
George, you don't realize what you got till it's gone. You're having a perfectly busy, normal life, and you're doing all the usual things, and you're an extremely busy person. You have lots of responsibilities, and you do cool things. And then suddenly you do this stupid exercise and like everything is fucked. And all you can think about is your back.
Exactly. I walked to the kettle this morning to make coffee, and I'm like, geez, I feel like a question mark. I was literally bent over. It was, it comes upon you when you don't know it, but I'll be right.
I have total sympathy with you. It's like these people who suddenly they wake up and they've got sciatica, and then basically every moment of every day they're just, whether they like it or not, they're enjoined in this pain that they cannot stop thinking about. It's like part of what's going on then for them for months sometimes. I hope yours is resolved fairly quickly. Go and see someone ASAP.
I think if it's still sore by lunchtime, I'll go and maybe have an X-ray. I'll see. But I think it feels muscular.
Just do it. Go.
You're right.
Get someone, get a professional to massage it out, or get a doctor to look at it, whatever. You just get it fixed and get medication as well. You don't need to be in pain. So, George, what do we got on the agenda this morning?
So, first story, Gareth, is a story of a bear. This is obviously in the United States, and we've spoken about animals getting into cars before, but this bear decided to get into a double cab bucky, and you can see the bear actually knows how to open the door. I mean, this is a video, and I just took screenshots out of the video, but the bear actually walks up to the car, knows where the handle is, pulls the handle, opens the door. And then this lady, they're driving past, and she's filming from the passenger seat of the car that's driving past, decides to jump out while she's filming. You can see the phone in her hand while she's filming to try and chase the bear. It's like nothing will escape TikTok.
But George, listen, first of all, we don't have anything like a bear in South Africa, so we don't know how these animals behave. And bears are, first of all, they're really dangerous. I mean, especially the big ones, the the grizzlies and the big brown bears and those ones. These things are not, and they're huge. That's a little one by comparison, that bear. But some of these bears are enormous. The fact that they're clever enough to open a car door, leave it alone. It's not your car. Get the hell away. Do not irritate the bear. It's like these Canadians who they get in the way of a moose. Have you ever seen how big a moose is?
Moose. I think a moose is probably, its back is as tall as our head. No, those things are big. They're huge. Right. But what's fascinating for me is that this lady climbs out of the car and she is fixated on filming this thing. So now your attention's partly on what you're filming, in a dangerous situation, what people
and
do
what if there's another bear? What if there's another one in the bushes? It's
like, the mother.
Exactly. That's the baby one. And you think, oh, that's a big bear. Let me film it. And then the mom comes out of the bushes and tries to eat you. Not good. Not good. Just quickly, George, Carl says it's not, of course, Carl's a doctor. It's not your muscle. You don't need an x-ray. Go to the physio. Literally got the same injury, the same exercise this week. You held your breath when you did that now. When you did that row. There we go. That's what he's saying.
Held my breath. Thank you, Carl. That is freaking amazing. I'm definitely now going to go and get that sorted out. Thank you.
Good.
So next story is, can you use Coke? Remember about a week or two ago, we spoke about opening a car door with a tennis ball and said that it's a load of bollocks. You can't open a car door with a tennis ball.
Yes.
Another thing now, this time you can use Coke to remove rust from a car. Now, whether everybody knows how rust works, it's just oxidization, and that's how the metal reacts and then creates rust. Coca-Cola, apparently, I mean, I didn't know this until I read the story, contains a phosphoric acid as well as citric acid and can remove stains as well as help remove rust from a car.
Well, George, interestingly enough, we had some wet tar put on the roads in our neighborhood, and there was a notice sent out on our WhatsApp group. So I've just had to scroll to find this. Someone said, I got damage to my vehicle and I'm trying to figure out how to get the tar off of my paint on my car without damaging the car further. And listen to these. So someone in the neighborhood said, "Vier af met bietjie kookolie," so cooking oil. And then someone else said, "Botter werk ook." So clearly there's a lot of old wives' tales here that are very handy with cars. You say Coca-Cola for removing the rust. My neighbors say that both cooking oil and butter will remove tar from a car.
I did not know that. And, tar is a very difficult thing to get off. That stuff is sticky. How do you think the black stuff stays on the road?
Yep. Correct. And in the heat that we're going through at the moment, it's probably not the best idea to put new fresh tar down.
Yeah, good point. Good point, because that tar is going to take longer to dry probably. And then I don't know if you are aware, I wasn't aware, that Lamborghini makes honey.
Please. What? Talk about extending your brand into places that it doesn't belong. Or, what do they call it? Diversifying your brand. They make honey. Actual honey. Now, the story behind the honey is that they had this big property, or have this big property that offices and I don't know if there's assembly plants on it, but they had a lot of space, so they decided to put up what honeybee
thing is called an aviary or something.
Apiary.
And apiary, yes. And apparently they produce 430 kilograms of honey per year in this, with 600,000 bees.
Mm.
And they bottle it. And it's sold in their shop at the premises. So if you want to go and visit Lamborghini, you can buy Lamborghini honey.
Well, it's a good one because also we apparently bees are endangered, and if honeybees can be looked after by Lamborghini, I don't really care who looks after them, but if Lamborghini are doing their bit, that's good. I'm all in favor. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I'm all in favor, but it's a stretch for a brand extension for me. But I think the story behind how it came about is not a bad one.
Ferrari, I mean, they sell towels and bedding and all kinds of crap, and people buy that. So you showed us an office the other day, someone's home office that was entirely kitted out for Ferrari. So you know what? Good for Lamborghini. At least they're doing something that's useful here.
And then very finally, this one I'm excited about, Gareth, because I've been saying this for a long time. I'm no car maker expert, but I've driven cars my entire adult life, probably like you have. And the voice assistants inside cars, and in fact, the mapping systems inside cars are absolutely shit. All of them are as bad as each other.
But compared to what? Like compared to Waze?
Well, compared to Google Maps or those mapping softwares, or compared to Google Home or Alexa.
Right.
So BMW has now realized this, and they are partnering with Amazon to build Alexa into Alexa stop. To build Alexa into their voice assistant in the car.
Yeah, you know what? This is clever because you got to stick to your knitting.
Yes.
Why would you, if you're a car manufacturer, why would you get involved in trying to make navigational software or voice activated software? It's not your area of expertise. You're going to spend a huge amount on research and development. You won't end up with as good a product as the guys who do that for a living.
Exactly. So I'm behind BMW. I think they're doing the right thing. Building. I'm not going to say her name because she's going to answer me.
Yeah, exactly. Hey Alexa, sing me a song. Listen to this. See what happens.
Nobody likes me. Everybody hates me.
All right, shut up, Alexa. Alexa, shut up. There we go. All right, there we go. Good morning, everybody. I hope you've had an excellent day, and I hope that that little song that my, what do you call it? What is it? A digital secretary?
Voice assistant.
That we got for you this morning. Nobody loves me, everybody hates me. I'm going to eat some worms. That was what was sung, in case you couldn't hear it properly. We will see you on Monday. George, I hope your back gets better. I will not be next week, but the team will be able to look after you from Monday to Friday. It's going to be a full schedule of stuff, and George will be back with the Auto Trader podcast on Monday too. Don't miss that. Have a good weekend, everyone. Cheers. Bye-bye.